This is Sigma's brand new 70-200 f2.8 Sport, a lens that we've all been waiting for a very long time. In today's video, I want to talk a little bit about this lens, talk about its functions, its features, also talk about things like price and build quality, but also show you the photos that I've taken with this lens because I have been testing it out for the past week. The 70-200 is considered a telephoto lens, and with telephoto lenses like these, something to be aware of is size and weight because they can get pretty big and heavy. Now this might seem like that, but if you actually take the lens hood off, it's comparable to a lot of other 70-200s available on the market. For example, if you look at the Sony G Master 70-200 Mark II, it's slightly longer by 1/4 of an inch and it weighs about 300 grams more than the Sony version, coming in at about 1,300 grams. If you take Canon's RF 70-200, for example, that lens is significantly smaller than this Sigma version. I think it's only about 5 or 6 inches tall, so it's nice for fitting into your backpack. But when you actually zoom into 200 millimeters, because it's an external zoom, it actually ends up being a little bit longer than the Sigma. Now, unlike Canon's 70-200, the brand new Sigma is all internal zoom, which means as you zoom in, you realize that the lens actually doesn't get any bigger, making it extremely easy to handle handheld. If you wanted to rig it up on a gimbal or something like that, you don't have to worry about rebalancing your gimbal because there's no weight shifting. And this also means that it's a lot more resistant to dust and water. If you take a look at other zoom lenses and the problems with other zoom lenses, the most common reason for dust getting behind the lens is because of a zoom's external barrel. Dust will sneak inside there, get behind the lens, and then you can't get it out. Now, if you ever shot with Sigma lenses, you know that Sigma does a great job with build quality, and it really shows with this lens. The rings are smooth, the buttons are tactile and firm, same with the switches. They don't feel like they're just like a toy. Honestly, this lens is built like a tank. The front element has a water and oil repellent coating, so water and dust don't adhere to the lens. And because this is part of Sigma's sport line, you do get all the benefits of being part of that sport line, which is not just autofocusing speed and things like that. It's also that the entire lens, the rings, the switches, the buttons, the mount connection are all dust and splash resistant. Now, in terms of quality and sharpness, it's like all other Sigma lenses. The sharpness and quality is just unreal. If you take a look at these portraits that I took of Anthony, Rich, and Will, and we zoom in here, you can just see how sharp this lens is, even at f2.8. In terms of bokeh, like most other telephotos, the bokeh is amazing. Obviously, because you're shooting at f2.8, you can't compare it to an 85mm f1.4 or a 135mm f1.4. But when you do zoom in to 200 millimeters or those higher focal lengths, you do get some amazing compression and some amazing bokeh. Just take a look at this photo taken at 200 millimeters, or even this one. Unreal. Now, on the outside of this lens, you'll see that there's a lot of functions, switches, and rings, and I'm gonna go through them and tell you what all of them do. Right off the bat, starting with the very front of the lens, we have a 77mm thread mount. So it's gonna take 77mm filters. On the end, we have our zoom ring that's from 70mm to 200mm. We also have our AFL custom buttons here. Not one, but we have 3 all around the camera lens, and I'll explain what those are for in a minute. But basically, AFL custom buttons, you can set them to whatever you want. So I have mine set up for my camera to go into APS-C crop mode. Basically, if I'm zoomed into 200 millimeters and I still want to get a little bit more extra range, all I have to do is click this custom button, and then it'll crop it in 1.5 times. So basically making the 70-200mm a 70-300mm. Now, like I said, we don't just have one of these buttons, we have three all around the lens itself, and this is for a good reason. If you're shooting in vertical mode, where your camera is flipped clockwise, it doesn't matter what orientation your camera lens is in. So this is straight. It's kind of hard to see without a camera because I'm using my camera, but basically if I turn it this way and I'm shooting vertical or in portrait mode, my finger lines up right on that button. And now if I want to go into landscape mode, my finger lines up on that button again. And then if I want to shoot the other way, portrait orientation to the other way around, counterclockwise to me, I turn it again and my finger lines up on that button. So it doesn't matter which orientation I shoot in or how I twist this lens, my finger is always going to line up on one of those AFL custom buttons. Just under that, we have a manual focus ring. So this is what you're going to use to focus when shooting in manual focus mode. And just under that, we have a aperture ring from f2.8 to f22. And then we have this A here, and basically what the A does is if you're someone who doesn't like to control the aperture from the lens and instead wants to use your camera's dials, you can switch it into the A, and now you can use your camera's dials to control your aperture. Now, if you want to make sure that you don't bump this ring and switch it into manual aperture, then there is a lock button here on the side that you can throw that in, and that basically locks your aperture ring. Now on the flip side here, we have a click switch, and this is also for our aperture, and that's whether or not you want a smooth aperture or an aperture that clicks. If we go up top, we have an AF/MF switch to switch between manual or autofocus. This lens uses dual HLA linear focus motors, which enables faster autofocusing speeds, perfect for sport photography, but it also helps minimize focus breathing. Now, I actually tested out the speed of autofocusing a couple days ago when I was out shooting. I had my friend Anthony run straight directly towards me to test out how fast the autofocusing actually is. It performed phenomenally, and then I got him to run towards me in kind of like a zigzag to see if it would track him, and it literally nailed every single shot. The autofocus was extremely fast, and it stuck to him or my subject perfectly fine. I later did the same thing with my friend Rich in a bright situation, and then I tested this with some skateboarders that I saw skateboarding on the side of the road. And again, the autofocus was extremely fast and it stuck onto my subject exactly like it should. Now we also got a focus limiter switch, which will limit the driving range for quick and precise focusing. So we have full, which it's in right now, and then right beside it, we have 3 meters to infinity, which means anything below 3 meters or closer than 3 meters, it will not focus to. And then our last one is basically our minimum focusing distance to 3 meters. So anything further away than 3 meters, it won't focus to. Now below that, we have our OS switch or optical stabilization, and we have 2 different modes. Mode 1 is for general shooting, and then mode 2 is basically stabilization in all directions, in vertical, in horizontal, even in or diagonally, which is great for panning shots and things like that. So I actually tested out these 2 stabilization modes, and basically what I did was I zoomed all the way into 200 millimeters, where you're gonna get the most camera shake. I had my OS switched to off, and there was no stabilization whatsoever, and you can actually see how crazy some of the shaking was. And then I switched it into 1, and then after I switched it into 2, tested out the different stabilization modes, and the difference was like night and day. Even when watching just on the camera screen itself, you were able to tell the difference. When shooting with telephoto lenses, optical stabilization is an absolute must, and the stabilization on this lens is great, giving you about 7.5 stops of stabilization on the wide end, so when shooting at 70 millimeters, and then when zooming into 200 millimeters, you're getting about 5.5 stops of stabilization. And below that, we have a custom switch, which you probably haven't seen on any other camera lenses. And what it does, well, I'll tell you what it does. Sigma says when it's off, the OS effect is well balanced. And then when you switch it into custom 1, it's a dynamic view mode. And this offers a recognizable optical stabilization effect to the image in the viewfinder. This helps to ensure the composition of images quickly. Switch it into custom 2 or moderate view mode, and this mode is quickly able to tell the difference between fine composition adjustment and unwanted camera shake. It provides a natural and smooth viewfinder image even when composition is changed rapidly. Basically, it controls how you see the image through your viewfinder. And at last, we have the tripod socket. Now, this is Arca Swiss compatible, so if you want to throw it on a tripod or even a monopod, you can do that with no extra mount. Now, apparently this is also detachable if you decide you don't want it, so you just unscrew it there, and I guess it comes off. You can shed some weight if you want. Now, one of the main reasons why I shoot with Sigma lenses is because of the price. For those of you who are subscribed and who have seen other videos, you know that I'm all about getting the best quality or comparable quality for the cheaper price. I'm not going to spend an extra $1,000 on a lens just because of the name or just because it's made by Sony. The price of this brand new 70-200 is coming in at $1,499 USD or 2,099 CAD or Canadian. If we look at Sony's 70-200mm f2.8 G Master Mark II, that lens is expensive, coming in at 2,798 USD or 3,499 Canadian. That's an extra $1,400 that you can save buying the Sigma version. Literally, $1,400 can get you this 24-70, 2 lenses for the price of 1 G Master. The savings is one of the reasons why I shoot with Sigma lenses, and you're not sacrificing build quality, sharpness, autofocusing, stabilization, or anything like that. So far, I really like this lens, but I've only got to test it out a couple of times. Testing it out, going for a walk downtown with my friends and taking photos of them and just taking random photos is not enough to make me fall in love or to suggest you buy it. That's why I will be taking this lens with me on my trip to Iceland at the end of the month, which will give me enough time to actually test out the lens properly and shoot with it, but also to take some banger photos. So make sure you do give this video a like and subscribe if you want to see what Iceland will look like through this lens. And with that being said, I'll see you in the next one.
That was dumb.
So we're downtown. Instead of taking photos, this guy's taking thumbnails, YouTube thumbnails.
Shh, don't worry about it.